What is going on, YouTube? I am Lamont at large. Today we are in Dannemora, New York. Right behind me, the 60-foot high walls of the Clinton Correctional Facility. Today we're going to talk about the story of how David Sweat and Richard Matt escaped this very prison right here. We're going to talk about that, but also we're going to talk about a little bit of the history of Richard Matt and David Sweat. Who were these guys and how did they end up here? A lot of people may not know this. We're going to visit a couple key locations in this town, and we're going to go to the capture location of both individuals. And the reason why this whole story happened, well, because basically Richard Matt, he charmed Joyce Mitchell with his good looks, his charm, his debonair, his genius IQ, some say, and he also had a very big, well, you've seen the thumbnail in the title, so enough about that. Let's get into this. Let's start off by talking about how David Sweat first got his start in the world of criminality. Now, many in the news media have described David Sweat as nothing more than a cold-blooded cop killer. But let me add a couple words to his description. Moron, idiot, buffoon, dummy, stupid. If the word duh was in the dictionary, this guy's ugly face that only a mother who was never in his life could love would be right in there. By the time he was 17 years of age, this guy had already been sentenced to 2 years in state prison for a robbery attempt. Now, this guy gets out of prison. Well, what does he do? Well, he commits more crimes. This guy is dumb, like I said. This guy's going around the area stealing anything and everything that's not tied down. This guy is stealing ATVs. He's stealing cars. He even stole an RV. He would take all of his stolen items and hide it behind this factory somewhere here in town. This guy is so dumb. One of his friends who was interviewed by a newspaper reporter told her that one night he comes to his house. He's dressed all in black, has gloves on his hands, ski mask. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I was going to go rob the convenience store around the corner, but when I got there, they were already closed. I was going to steal all their lottery tickets." Yeah, that's how stupid this guy is. One night, this guy decides to rob a group home. So he's dressed all in black. That's his favorite color, apparently. And he's walking up to the group home. Why do you want to rob a group home? What's there that you want? I don't know. So he's walking to the group home, and one of the workers there sees him and calls the police. The police come, promptly arrest him, and throw him in jail where he rightfully belongs. So he's in jail, right? And one day, deputies in the jail, they do a just like a cell search. And they're looking through his things, and they see paper with his handwriting of places he wants to rob with maps and layouts if he gets out of jail. So they take it to the judge. Needless to say, the judge did not let him out of jail. This guy is an absolute moron. All he does is steal, drink, do drugs, and do it all over again the next day. So this is Grange Hall Park right here. About 4 o'clock in the morning, July 4th, 2002, Deputy Kevin Targia, who at that time was a 13-year veteran of the Broome County Sheriff's Department, is doing routine patrol. Now, Deputy Targia doesn't live very far from here, less than a mile. So he could have been on his way home for lunch or whatever. I don't know. For some unknown reason, he road right here, and he pulls into this park. Now, guess who's at this park at 4 o'clock in the morning, July 4th, 2002? Well, it's David Sweat and two of his stupid friends, Jeffrey Namebinger Jr. and Sean Duvall. What are they doing at this park at 4 o'clock in the morning on July 4th? Well, they're not setting off firecrackers, that's for sure. They're transferring guns from one vehicle to another. They had committed a couple of gun stores in the area. So Deputy Targia, he comes into the park and he sees like 3 idiots. So he's probably wondering, what are you guys doing here at a park? Now, these people, again, these are very, very stupid, dumb idiots. They could have done this anywhere else. They could have gone to Walmart at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and did it. They could have gone to an abandoned mall, wherever. But these morons decide to do it at this park at 4 o'clock in the morning. Deputy Targia steps out of his vehicle, and immediately Davis Sweat pulls out his gun and shoots at him. Pop, 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 pop. He strikes Deputy Targia at least once or twice in the upper torso, so the deputy falls to the ground. Immediately, Davis Sweat gets into his vehicle and proceeds to run over the deputy. And then all of a sudden, Davis Sweat tells Naybinger, he's like screaming with his high-pitched girly voice, "Hey man, shoot him, shoot him." And this idiot, Jeffrey Naybinger, he runs up to the deputy and shoots him twice in the head. Pop, pop. Now, by this time, you hear multiple gunshots, and there's a man, at the time, Timothy Finch, he was an employee of the city of Kirkwood. He hears multiple gunshots. Now, he knows the difference between a gunshot and firecrackers. So after these morons flee out of here into the night, into the morning, whatever, Mr. Finch runs to the park, and he's heard at least 15 gunshots. So he runs to this baseball field right here, and he's standing at third base. He's like far away. And he's looking, and he sees the deputy's vehicle. But he really can't tell if he can see a cop there or a deputy, because there's fog. He can barely see. So he calls 911, and he's basically waiting on this baseball field right here. He's waiting for the cops to arrive to see what's going on. But they never arrived. He's waiting there for about 20 to 30 minutes. Nobody arrived, but he cannot see Deputy Targia lying on the ground dying. So finally, after 30 minutes, he leaves. He goes back home. For the next hour and a half after that, finally a passerby comes into this park and sees Deputy Targia on the ground covered in blood. Deputy sheriffs arrive to the scene with EMS. There's nothing that they could do. He's pronounced dead at the scene. 2 hours after he was shot, finally help arrives. Now, the coroner stated that even if a paramedic was here at the scene immediately after he was shot, there was nothing at all whatsoever that they were going to be able to do to save that man's life. This right here, this is a memorial in memory of Deputy Kevin Targia. Gave his life in this Kirkwood Town Park in the line of duty. So now you have a couple of cold-blooded killers driving off, and you have a sheriff's deputy murdered in cold blood. It was not easy finding his grave because there's leaves absolutely everywhere covering most of the graves of this part of the cemetery. But Kevin's grave is right here. And he's buried next to his nephew, that's Jared Targia. And let me say really quickly, I've heard multiple pronunciations of this name, so if I am not pronouncing it correctly, I do apologize. I heard 4 different pronunciations, and I wasn't sure which one to go with. But nonetheless, rest in peace to both Kevin and Jared. I don't know what happened to Jared. Just says that he died all of a sudden. So I have no idea. Just a man doing his job, that's it, and runs into 3 cold-blooded murderers. Now, Sean Duvall ended up pleading to a lesser charge, probably in exchange for testifying against those 2 knuckleheads. And David Sweat and Jeffrey Namebinger, they were both sentenced to life in prison. The family of Deputy Tarja wanted the death penalty, and they should have got it. Probably would have prevented this whole rigmarole that happened. Okay, guys, our next stop, we're gonna drive, I don't know, I want to say about 250, 300 miles to the other side of New York State. We're gonna go to Buffalo. We're gonna talk about who Richard Matt, the proverbial star of this video, what was his story? How did he end up at the Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York? Let's get going. And now we're going to talk about the proverbial star of this video, and that is one well-hung Richard Matt. It is what it is, guys. So what can we say about this guy? You could almost say he was born evil. He was born into a totally dysfunctional family. You had his father, Robert Matt. You had an older brother, Robert Jr. And then, of course, you had Richard. And their father, prototypical scumbag, in and out of jail and prison, robbing, doing anything he could to make a buck, was doing drugs, selling drugs, writing bad checks. And his 2 younger sons, they took off after their father, and they both led a life of crime. Now, eventually they were placed in the foster care system, and they were taken in by a pretty well-known family back in those days by the last name of Eden, and they were known for taking in foster kids. And listen, the Edens, they seen that these kids were very, very troubled, so they did their best to provide them with a decent home life. You know, they would take them to sporting events, they would take them out to the movies, just being, you know, regular family, even enrolling them in Little League. But let me tell you, their upbringing, what their father did by just instilling into them that stealing from people is okay, hurting people is okay. I mean, these kids were totally screwed by the time they were 12 years old. And if you went to school with Richard Matt, he was more than a bully. This guy absolutely terrorized any and all who were around him. I don't know if this guy had many friends, but this guy was an absolute bad egg. And he was already pretty well known by the police going into his early teenage years. There was a detective that tried to help him. We're going to get into that story of former Tonawanda detective Bentley here a little bit later. But people tried to help this guy, and there was absolutely no helping him. He was just one of those kids that they were a train and their track headed towards a life of crime, and he wasn't going to deviate off that track. He was just a bad egg. And, you know, you can blame his family upbringing, but a lot of us have bad upbringings, and we don't turn out that way. How evil Richard Matt was. So by the time he's 15, 16, he's already getting arrested. He's already getting locked up, going to jail. He has quite a criminal rap sheet. He has a sex assault, several different robberies. This guy didn't want to work. This guy was not the type of person that wanted to work a regular job. All he wanted to do was take from you, hurt you. This guy, like, he was really weird because it was almost like he couldn't feel pain. There's a video of him stabbing himself with a dart, and he just thinks nothing of it.
This is my friend Ricky Matt right here. He's a freaking crazy lunatic maniac.
A chilling video surfaces, recorded in 1997. That's one of the 2 escapees, a younger, skinnier, but just as twisted Richard Matt, known then as Ricky.
South American blowgun.
This is the South American blowgun.
Recorded on Super 8 film, an acquaintance demonstrating a blowgun by firing it at Matt.
Ricky with a smile.
Here we go. We're about to shoot the dart into Ricky's arm.
Just listen to what he says.
We're gonna dip these in AIDS blood, and we'll put a patent on them. We'll sell them as deadly weapons. What do you think?
The camera rolls as the dart goes right into Matt's arm.
Went in there, started to come out there.
He doesn't even flinch.
Just an outright animal, if you will. He had gotten arrested for a battery on a woman, almost killed her. And back in 1986, he was in jail at the Erie County Correctional Facility, and he escaped, right? So this, the escape at Dannemora, that wasn't the first escape. He escaped, hopped a freight train over to his brother's house, and he was apprehended 4 days later, earning himself a longer jail sentence. So you got Richard Matt in and out of jail, in and out of jail. So sometime, I want to say 1991, I could be wrong. So he meets a man by the name of Will Rickerson. I'm not quite sure if they already knew each other, and I'm not 100% sure if Will already knew who Richard Matt was. So Will Rickerson was a businessman, and he lived in this area right here, and we're going to go to his house where he used to live. And he owned a couple taverns. He might have owned like a bed and breakfast, or like maybe a motel or an inn, whatever you want to call it. This guy was very well known in the North Tonawanda business community. And he operated a business over on Military Road. His business was a little odd. So what Mr. Rickerson would do was he would buy food from whoever, maybe a distributor or whatever, and this was food that was about to go bad. Like, it might have already actually went bad. I don't know. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying he sold expiring food. So for instance, if you own a pizza shop over here and you want cheese at a really good discount, you're going to go to Mr. Rickerson's business and he's going to say, hey, this cheese is going bad, guy. This cheese is going, real bad. And that pizza guy's like, hey, I'll take it off your hands. The food wasn't expired, but at any moment now, things can go bad. So Richard Matt, he goes to this guy's business and he says, hey, listen, I just got out of jail for DUI. Probably didn't tell him, the other bad and awful things that he's done. A lot of evil and bad things he's done. And he says, I need a job. So he said, okay, that's fine. And he works for Mr. Rickerson. And again, about the dates, it could have been even the late 90s. I'm not terribly sure about the dates. But so he's working for Mr. Rickerson, right? And Mr. Rickerson is starting to notice that things are coming up missing. And he's had employees that has worked for him for a long time. You're not going to all of a sudden start stealing, but if you hire a new guy and all of a sudden a thing of meat disappears or whatever, canned tomatoes. So he ends up firing Richard, and I guess Richard was really angry. I guess he was thinking to himself, well, how dare you fire me for stealing from me? This is what kind of sick and twisted mind Richard Matt had. So he gets fired, and sometime later, Mr. Rickerson comes to work and notices that somebody shot out one of the windows in one of his trucks, probably with a pellet gun. Maybe he shattered it or he just broke it out, whatever. So obviously this guy, Richard Matt, he's thinking, okay, I just fired this guy. This guy's that now he's coming and breaking my stuff. Just a nutcase, probably just says whatever with it. He's probably dealt with people like that before. And then all of a sudden, Richard Matt has a change of heart now, right? He has a change of heart. So he goes back to the job and says, hey, man, I'm sorry that I'm a thieving scumbag. Can I please get my job back? And Mr. Rickerson tells him to buzz off. So Richard Matt was again let down by yet another person. And now he's going to get his revenge. And the revenge is in his brain, for some unknown reason, in his drug-addled, alcohol-sloshed brain. He believes that for some unknown reason, Will Rickerson has all of this money at his house. Now, the reason why he thought that was because Mr. Rickerson dealt in a cash-only business. It was only cash. That's it. Maybe he'd take a credit card, I don't know, but he dealt with cash, and he always had a large amount of cash, because if somebody came to his business and spent $3,000 on whatever food product that he had, he probably, kept it in some kind of a safe at his business or whatever, and Richard Matt probably seen these transactions. So one of Matt's favorite hangouts was a couple different strip clubs over on the other side of the Canadian border. So that's where he meets this guy named Lee Bates, another loser. So you got two losers going to strip clubs all the time, just being losers, right? And one night he tells Lee, he's like, hey man, I got fired from this guy. He had the audacity to fire me for stealing, right? I know, who would have thought? But this guy has a lot of money. He goes, he might even have $100,000 in a safe in his house. Or maybe it's in his business, who knows? But he has a lot of money. And Lee Bates, just being similar to Richard Matt, just being a loser that didn't really want to work, didn't really want to do anything, was very interested in this supposed gold mine that was going to be available to them if only they could rob him. So they start formulating a plan. They said, this is what we'll do. I know where he lives. He's an old man now. He's in his mid-late 70s, I think 76. And we'll barge into his house. I'll talk my way into the house, say, oh, hey, man, I'm sorry, whatever. Then we'll go in there. We'll tie him up. We'll tell him where the money is, and we'll get the money. We'll be free. Now, I don't think Lee is thinking this ahead, because Lee doesn't know how dangerous Richard is. He knows him, but he doesn't really know him that well. So they go to this house that we're going to walk by right now. So they go to his house and knock, knock, knock. Mr. Rickerson opens the door. Boom, they bum rush him. And then they start beating him up. Pop, pop, pop. Starts punching him in his face. Again, this man was in his mid-late 70s, and he was only 5'5". He was a little guy. So they get him on the floor. They tie him up. And then Richard starts shouting, where's the money? Where's the money? And Lee's like, okay, well, I'm going along with it. So Richard Matt is just working this guy up, punching him, kicking him, all this and that. And then Lee starts thinking to himself, like, man, I didn't really sign up for this. They've already been in the house for so long. I believe a neighbor or somebody had came to the door. Maybe Richard told him, if you say anything, I'll kill you right now. So the person at the door, they left. And this guy, Richard, is just torturing him. He got either a pencil or something along those lines and shoved it right in his ear, breaking his eardrum, right? This guy broke one of his fingers, snap, just like a twig. Now, Lee's getting nervous, right? Because he's like, man, what the hell did I get myself into? I'm sure his life is flashing before his eyes. He's like, man, I didn't sign up for this. I just wanted to come and rob him and leave, and you're just doing all this and that. So as they have him tied up, Richard says, screw this. They get him, they throw him in the back of their car. And then now you have these two weirdos and this poor old man and tied up in the back of the trunk. And they're driving everywhere. They're driving, they even drove out to like Pennsylvania. They drove out to parts of Ohio. This is going on for the better part of 24 hours, guys, mind you. So they would drive around for a little bit. Richard would get out of the car, open the trunk like at a secluded location, and he would say, where's the money? Where's the money? And Mr. Rickerson would say, like, you know, whatever he would say, like, I'm not giving you anything, or I don't know what you're doing, or blah, blah, blah. And he punched him in his face. Pop, pop, pop. Just for the next 24 hours, this man was absolutely tortured. Oh, you're not going to tell me where the money is? Crack, another finger broken. I mean, this guy is an outright animal. This guy's absolutely insane. Now, while Richard is doing this, Lee is besides himself. He keeps telling Richard, man, why do you keep beating him up, man? Just let him go. This has gone on way too much more. We already got like a kidnapping charge. Let's just be done with it and get out of here. But no, Richard has a bone to pick with Will Rickerson for some unknown reason. So he's beating him. Where's the money? Punch him in his face. Smash his nose. Whatever it is that he did. Where's the money? Bam! Just beating and beating and beating this man to death. So finally, Richard Matt is at his wit's end. He is getting tired of this nonsense. This guy is telling him he doesn't have any money. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Richard is saying like, oh, I know you got money and you're safe. And Will Rickerson's like, dude, what are you talking about? Like, I don't have any money in the safe. Whatever it is exactly that he's telling them, Lee is not hearing every part of the conversation. So finally, Will Rickerson has enough. And by the way, you know, this guy was a military veteran, World War II. You know, I'm sure he's done his time, probably a tough guy himself. And finally, he snaps back at Richard Matt and he says, why do you have this guy involved in this? Somewhere along those lines. He says, why do you have this guy involved in this? He goes, this is between me and you. And Richard Matt decided then and there, he's had enough. With his bare hands, he grabs one side of Will Rickerson's face, takes his other hand, grabs the other side of his face, crack! Breaks his neck with his bare hands. And Lee Bates is watching this, and at first he just wanted to score a robbery, and now this guy killed this man with his bare hands. And all he's thinking of is, okay, now I guess I'm going to go to prison for the rest of my life. And you got to imagine, Richard Matt was so violent, Lee Bates was probably afraid of him. And he just witnessed a man being murdered by the bare hands of another. And now it's too late now. He's already along for the ride. And what else can you do? That house directly across the street on your screen, that is the residence where Will Rickerson used to live almost 25 years ago. And this is a pretty nice neighborhood. You got a middle-class street right here where people take care of their yards, they take care of their lawns, and I don't know how many people lived here at that time, but I'm pretty sure if somebody moved here in 2010, they probably would not know that this horrible crime took place right here in this very, very quiet neighborhood. Currently walking right beside the Clinton Correctional Facility here in Dannemora. So let's talk a little bit about the history of this place. So this prison was built and ready to go in 1845. This is the largest maximum security prison in the state of New York. And now back when the prison was built, they used to use prisoners as labor because they had a couple mines here and in Lion Mountain. And later on, after the mining kind of died out, they just kind of went back into their cells and did what they did. Now, there's been some very famous inmates that have lived here and live here till this day. You have Vito Guarino. He was a hitman for Murder, Inc. You have Paul Guidel Jr., who is the longest serving prison inmate ever in the history of the United States. He was here for 68 years, 296 days. He wasn't here exactly at this prison, but for a time he was in the prison. On July 26, 1911, when he was 17 years old, he murdered a man named William H. Jackson. So he comes here and he's incarcerated in New York from 1911. He was finally paroled on May 7th of 1980 at the age of 86. He lived another 7 years and then he died at the age of 93. I might be doing a vlog about him in the near future because that's pretty interesting. But other than him, there's been Julio Gonzalez. I did a vlog about the crime that he committed. I'll put that link to the video in the description box below. He murdered about 87 people. That's an interesting and very, very sad video. There's been other killers. Lucky Luciano, he did time here. And if you guys are a fan of hip hop and or rap music, Hell Rel, he was a resident here for a time. Old DB from Wu-Tang Clan, Old Dirty Bastard, he did time here. Tupac Shakur, one of the greatest rappers, probably the greatest rapper that ever lived, he did time at this prison. Shine, and of course, who doesn't know Bobby Shmurda? Huh? Do the shmoney dance. Guys, anybody doing the shmoney dance over here? Well, he did his time here at the Clinton Correctional Facility. The inmates call this New York's Little Siberia. And as you can see, they call it Little Siberia because there's nothing around here. This place is pretty barren. The closest big city to this place is Plattsburgh, New York. There's about 5,000 people that live in this very town, and 1,000 people work in this prison. Not everybody that works at the prison lives in this town, but basically this is one of these prototypical prison towns that it's basically alive because of the prison. So basically this town is only here, like I said, because of this place. You have some officers getting on, getting off of work. This is, I guess, shift change or what have you. So let's talk a little bit about the escape and how it happened and why it happened. So in this prison right here, you have many jobs.
You have the right to harass a civilian who's across the street.
Ma'am, did I say anything to you?
He
No, I
has
did
the
not.
right to do what he's doing. I commend him for what he's doing.
Okay.
How do you
I
like
just-
that one?
Anyway.
So is there
That's what I thought.
is there anything else that we need to say?
You're free to, sir, you're free to go.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good day. No, I've just got to walk around the prison and then just finish up so I can leave.
I'll wait for him.
Well, of course you'll wait for them. You're at work right now. I mean, are we going to have any more problems or can I just go?
Who asked you to stay, sir?
No, you interrupted my video. Now I'm interrupting your conversation with your friend or your buddy. I didn't say anything to you. Trust me, I do this for a living. I know where I can and I know where I can't film. and I've called ahead, you're more, again, like I said, you're more than welcome to call the police on me if you feel you need to do so. Go ahead and do whatever it is that you got to do. Sorry about that, guys. I apologize. I was rudely interrupted by somebody that does not know the laws of where you can and cannot film in the United States of America. So let's continue. Like I said, so this prison on any given month will house just about 3,000 people. I don't think they go much more than that. There's several other prisons all throughout upstate New York that they could send inmates to when they are, when they think that they're getting too full. So this prison is mainly known for workers who work inside, and they work in the tailor shop. The tailor shop, they're making underwear, socks. There's some kind of an asbestos abatement program, so they make hazmat suits for the inmates. The tailor shop employs about 400 people. So if you guys are thinking that whatever happened that happened here, this was like a little tiny shop. No, this was basically a factory. So David Sweat originally got to this prison in 2003, and Richard Matt, he followed him, I want to say a few years later, after he was extradited to Mexico for the murder of Mr. Rickerson and was sentenced to 25 years to life. So Richard Matt was doing 25 years to life here, and David Sweat, as I know, was doing life. I don't think he had any kind of a chance for parole. Now let's go to 2015. Now this prison has had a lot of issues with employees. Just recently, a woman was arrested here for having inappropriate relations with an inmate. So it looks like people here have not really learned their lessons when it comes to what you do and do not do when you're at work, fraternizing with the inmates. Now, when you work with inmates and you've known them for years, they almost become your friends, but you got to be careful because a lot of these guys are very manipulative. So you had a woman who worked in the tailor shop named Joyce Mitchell, and her husband, Lyle, also worked there. Now, if you look at interviews from Joyce Mitchell's former husband, he kind of relates to her as kind of like a sex addict. And they had a kid together. They get a divorce because she was cheating on him with somebody else. And she takes her kid and she shacks up with Lyle Mitchell, and they get married. And Lyle, he takes care of this kid like it's his own. So you have several inmates here working in a tailor shop getting special privileges. Now, there's a section of the prison called the honor block, and that was where David Sweat and Richard Matt were kept at. The honor block, you had a lot of privileges, especially for a maximum security prison. You could wear like your own clothes in the honor block. I believe you were allowed like a hot plate in your cell. You were allowed a refrigerator. Your cell was not locked. It was locked at night, but in the daytime, you can come and go as you please. Do you know how many inmates that are here right now that would, slice their own mother's throat just to have a chance of being allowed to stay in the honor block? So these guys, they're in the honor block. They become friends. Richard Matt, again, an absolute psycho. I mean, I've said it before, this guy was an absolute animal. And David Sweat, of course, just being a dumb guy. So the story gets a little bit murky on if David Sweat and Joyce Mitchell actually had a relationship or not. Joyce denies it up and down. She's like, whoa, wait. I never, ever had sex with David Sweat. Well, if you had never had sex with David Sweat, why are you giving naked pictures of yourself to Richard Matt to give to David Sweat? I don't understand how that worked out. So according to Joyce, Richard Matt and her, they become really, really close. They are, become super close, obviously. And, in the beginning part of 2015, Richard Matt, he tells Joyce, he's like, hey, I need a couple tools, if you will. Now, the prison employees that were coming in and out of here, normally a prison, when you work there, you're supposed to go through a metal detector and they're supposed to search your bags when you come in and when you come out. But this prison, they got absolutely lazy. They got apathetic, and that's why this whole thing happened. It's just because of pure and unbridled carelessness and laziness. So he asks Joyce, he says, I need a star-shaped tool bit or a screwdriver. He needs 2 hacksaws. And Joyce, being the dummy that she is, she smuggles these tools into some frozen meat. So she gets a round of chuck or whatever, just, meat or whatever. She sticks it in the meat, she puts it in her freezer, and then she brings it into the prison in her bag. They don't search her bag, like I said. She throws it into the employee's dining room freezer, and then it disappears because the other corrections officer would come, pick up the meat, and then take it to Richard Matt. So around January or February of 2015, they start making their plan to escape. Now, originally, when they were going to escape, as Richard Matt was, sleeping and having sex with Joyce Mitchell in the tailor shop, they start formulating a plan. So they said, oh, baby, we're going to escape. We're going to be together forever. Me, you, and David. That whole trio thing is kind of weird. I don't understand what they were doing or what they were talking about. So their plan was to break out of prison, kill her husband, and then flee to Mexico, which would be about, 2,500 miles over there. But the night of the escape, things were not coming to plan as they were supposed to. So on or around January, February 2015, when Joyce starts smuggling the tools for the escape that Richard Matt and David Sweat had planned on, I don't know if you guys know this, but David Sweat did all of the work. Richard Matt did nothing. So when David gets the tools, he starts sawing away slowly but surely. He starts sawing at the wall in his cell. He saws like an 18-inch long hole for him to fit through. He goes through the wall, and then he's at all of these, 4-story tall catwalks and pipes. So over the course of about 4 or 5 months, he learns the layout of the inside of the prison. He figures out that there's a steam pipe there that will lead to a manhole cover, which I'm going to show you here in just a second. So this guy, for months and months and months, with just hacksaw blades, slowly, methodically, just sawing. So normally prisons like this, they have a standing count. I'm not exactly sure how this prison does it, but basically what they'll do is this, say 11 o'clock, lights out, whatever time they do, you have to stand at your prison cell to be accounted for. You stand, they see you, but even then, a lot of times, they weren't even doing standing counts. I mean, these guys were lazy. And that's what it is with your job. You got a boring job, not much happens, and you just get apathetic about things. The same thing over and over happens again. You're like, yeah, whatever. So David Sweat would just stand at a cell, get counted, and then as soon as they leave, he learned like exactly when the guards would come, he would roll up clothes, like make it like he was sleeping. He would put in his bed and he would go down, and for the next 5-6 hours every night for almost 6 months, this guy was sawing and sawing. He sees a 24-inch large pipe, right? And this guy is really wiry, really skinny, but he's really strong. So he starts sawing at this pipe. And one of the items that I didn't mention earlier that Joyce brought to Richard Matt was a pair of glasses with lights. So this guy, David Sweat, he's down there and it's hot. So he has like a little electric fan keeping him cool. So he's just sawing and sawing and sawing and sawing for months and months and months. I mean, and they could have easily caught this guy out of his cell one night. If they had just gone into his cell one time and noticed that he was missing and seen that hole, this would have never happened. Sawing and sawing and sawing. And finally, sometime around maybe the end of May or something, when he completed when he actually cut the pipe, he's free. Whatever time he cut the pipe, he tells Richard Matt, he said, listen, you're a chubby guy. You're a chubette. You know what I mean? You got to lose some weight. So Richard Matt goes on some kind of crazy crash diet. He probably was like working out or not eating or whatever, just to lose enough weight to fit into that pipe. About a block away right here, this is some form of a power plant or something along that nature. Now on June 5th of 2015, Richard and David were supposed to meet Joyce right here. She was supposed to park her car right in that lot so they could rendezvous, go to her house, drug the husband, kill him, and then they would be off to Mexico, probably after having sex. Maybe all three together. I'm really not sure what weirdness was going on over there. So the reason why they were supposed to meet right here is because, well, we're only a block away from the prison. And all of the prison inmates, they know that in this town, that is a landmark. But on that night, things would not go according to plan. So I guess Joyce, the night before on June 4th, 2015, starts getting real nervous. She's about to kill her husband. So her and her husband have dinner at some Chinese joint in town, and she just starts getting a panic attack and she can't go through with it. She gets cold feet. So she never shows up to this rendezvous point. Now, on the early morning, or late evening hours of June 4th, after the standing count, when all of the holes are cut, everything is open and ready to go, David Sweat and Richard Matt, they make their escape. They go through like a series of like all of these like catwalks. They start shimmying down pipes. They go quite a way. So they're running and running and running. And, they think that they got a car waiting for them, right? They think that this woman is going to be waiting for them. And they actually think, this is how crazy all three of these clowns were. They actually think that they're going to get away with this nonsense. But little do they know that Joyce ain't going to be waiting for them. No, she decides on that morning, June 5th, 2015, she checks herself into some kind of a hospital with either a panic attack or she's claiming that she's having chest pains, whatever it is that was wrong with her. She was fine having sex with this guy for months on end in this prison. And then all of a sudden now that when it comes down to it, she ain't ready to do this. So as they slowly but surely make their way down the catwalks, down the pipes, shimming, they, I believe, get into the steam pipe and they just start kind of like running and jogging. Now, as they left a little note that said something about "have a nice day" with some goofy face on it or something like that. So these guys, obviously, they're really trying to thumb their nose at the prison guards when they find out that they escaped. So before they left their cells, they took clothes. They didn't even like really make any kind of dummies like they did in the Alcatraz escape. They just took their clothes and then they crumpled them up like they were under their blankets asleep. Now, I'm not sure exactly what time they found out. I think it was 5:30 a.m. Don't quote me. But morning comes. Hey, Richard. Hey, David. Time to get up or time for breakfast or whatever. And they don't answer. And they say, hey, open up cells, this and that. And they're gone. Now, I forgot to mention earlier, but they had actually requested that their cells be moved together about 5 months before this all happened. And as you can see right here, that's the prison, and you got the power plant right over there. So you can clearly see it. So they would have been running in this neighborhood. And this is the manhole cover where they climbed out of. Right here. Yeah, not very far from the prison. And so now these guys are free. But when they get to the power plant, Joyce ain't there. One of the residents in this very neighborhood, I don't know what house it was, he has seen these guys running through his backyard because now, like, the sun's coming up, they don't know what to do. These guys immediately should have been caught. I don't know why in God's name how they were able to get away. We're gonna follow the locations of where they were eventually caught. But you got two guys now, granted, they're not wearing their prison jumpsuit clothes. They're probably wearing their sweats or whatever clothes you were allowed to wear on the honor block. So when you see two guys running in your yard, you live right next to a prison, and you don't know who they are, because everybody in this neighborhood, everybody knows everybody. I mean, people have been giving me the eye since I've been in town. If they don't know who you are, they're kind of wondering what you're doing here, because nobody's coming to Dannemora for a vacation or a latte or whatever. So this guy yells at them, "Hey, what are you doing in my yard?" And one of them says, "Oh, sorry." And they were able to escape this town without having any car. Joyce flakes on them. They're on the run. You had all these cops searching every single house. When they discovered that they were escaped, they're searching every single house, knocking on every single door. They got roadblocks everywhere. You could not drive down that street where the prison's at right there without having to have your car searched. So this guy yells at them as he's seeing them running in through his backyard. "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And they're like, "Oh, sorry, we're lost." And then they just escaped. And you could not drive down this street right here where the prison's at. You couldn't drive down that street without having to have your car searched. They had roadblocks all up and down these streets. They're knocking on all these houses, searching their houses, making sure that there's nobody hiding there or that nobody's being taken hostage. And for hours on end that day, they're probably thinking, "Oh, they're hiding under a house. They're maybe on top of a roof. They're definitely in this area." They couldn't have gone very far. Little did they know that Richard Matt and David Sweat really did not want to go back to prison. And, you know, you got two dangerous individuals with practically nothing at all to lose. Little did the people know, all of the state troopers, all of the border patrol guards, little did they know that these guys would be miles and miles away. I'm going to go to the location where they were found. I'm going to show you how they got away. I mean, this is a pretty wild story, to say the least. Okay, we are here in Malone, New York. Now, a lot has gone on that the authorities don't know. These guys are still on the run. These guys are desperate. They're dangerous. They've gotten reports of people being seen in the area that match their description. Now, they've gotten literally tens of thousands of calls. You have well over 1,000 law enforcement officials looking for these two guys. You also have the authorities in the Canadian side of the border looking for these fellows as well. So the dangerous David Sweat and the hung Richard Matt are very desperate, and they're trying to make their way to the Canadian border. Now, a couple things have taken place since their escape. Number one, Joyce Mitchell has been found out and has confessed to helping smuggle their tools to escape the prison with the help of corrections officer Gene Palmer. Now, Gene Palmer was the one that would take the meat that Joyce would leave in the freezer of the kitchen area of the tailor shop employees and bring it to Matt's cell. And in exchange, Matt was giving Gene Palmer some of his paintings for trade for that and other stuff. So she's in jail right now. Gene Palmer got arrested. He bails out for about $25,000 and he's immediately fired from his job. And you have David Sweat, who is celebrating a 35th birthday as a free man sleeping under the stars. Joyce Mitchell, fired from her $50,000 a year job. She has a pension, she has benefits, a pretty damn good job if I do say so myself. But she threw it all away to be romanced by the big guy, if you will, Richard Matt. Now, there is a lot that the authorities don't know about David Sweat and Richard Matt. Number one, they don't know where they're at. They know they're somewhere in this area. They couldn't have gotten too far, and they believe that they are making their way to the Canadian border. But what they don't know is that David Sweat had this ball and chain on his leg that was preventing him from further continuing his quest for freedom. And that ball and chain's name was Richard Matt. So in an interview with investigators, David Sweat tells them that one day they're walking and David Sweat is just getting tired of Richard. He's getting tired of him drinking. Every cabin that they're breaking into, if you find some, booze, he's drinking it, he's getting drunk, he's getting sloppy. Mind you, at the time, David Sweat just turned 35. He's healthy, he's young, he's strong. Richard Matt is approaching 50 years of age. He's heavy, he's out of shape. He's really dragging him down. Every time he's getting drunk, he just keeps talking about how they're gonna get caught, how he'd rather die than to be taken back to prison. David is getting sick and tired of his nonsense. So one day they're just walking and David lies and says, "Oh, look, there's some cops over there." And he just starts hauling A. He's just hauling. And Richard's like runs with them, you know what I mean? And he just outruns Richard Matt into the wilderness. He's jogging. He's not running from the cops per se, but he's running from Matt. So finally he leaves Matt in the dust. So now he's free to be his own person, to try to escape on his own without being held down by the proverbial ball and chain. I can go on that. Richard Matt. So now these two, they're separated. Authorities don't know that, but they're soon gonna find out. Walking down Route 30, a man is driving his camper down this road right here, and all of a sudden he hears a pop, and he hears like a thud in the back of his camper. And he's thinking to himself, he said, "Did somebody shoot at my camper?" So he continues to drive into town. He gets out, checks his camper, and sure enough, there's a bullet hole in the back of it. So he calls 911. He says, "Hey, I was driving down Route 30 and somebody shot at me and hit my camper." So the police, they start swarming this area. So you must have had at least 100 law enforcement officials just focused on this area where they think the gunshot came from. So they come over here and they see this camper right here, and they're combing all through the backwoods up here looking for the escaped individuals. Now later on, there were some items, and I believe there was some kind of feces in the area, and they tested it, and then later on proved to be from Richard Matt. And this is the camper where Richard Matt was hiding at for the last few days of his life. He actually turned 49 years of age, drinking his life away in this very camper right here. He probably slept on that side because there's more cushion, and there was food in here and booze maybe, or empty booze bottles. And that was Richard Matt's little cooler right there. So as the officers, Border Patrol, county sheriffs, state police, they're looking for this guy somewhere in the back of these woods, not very far from this camper right here. They're just combing the area, and they hear somebody cough. Then one of the officers, law enforcement officers, motioned to the other guy, "Hey, I heard somebody cough." And then one of the officers sees Richard Matt lying on his stomach with a shotgun in his hand. Now, whoever you want to believe, personally me, I'm firing first, and I'll ask questions next week. They reportedly told him to drop his weapon. He refused, and he was shot 3 times right in the head. That's some pretty damn good aim from those officers, and the end of Richard Matt's life was somewhere in these woods, not very far from where he sought refuge from the elements. this very camper. And 2 days later, a very tired, very road-weary Davis Sweat would also meet law enforcement officers, but luckily he would live to tell his tale. When they seen him, they fired at him, hitting him twice in the torso, and they captured him alive. He was in very, very serious condition. They took him to the hospital where he made a full recovery. They shot him about 16 miles north of here. He was 2 miles away from the Canadian border. I wonder if he knew how close he was to making it to Canada. But even if he'd have made it to Canada, there would have been law enforcement in Canada there to capture him. A 3-week manhunt for 2 escaped killers finally comes to an end. This story was the biggest news story easily of the summer of 2015. I followed it through and through, and I was so shocked that these guys made it that far for that long. Usually when people escape prison, they're usually captured within a day or two. But I found it absolutely amazing that they were able to get along for as long as they did. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And for any of you guys wondering what happened to the people that were associated with helping Richard, Matt, and Davis Sweat escape prison, well, I'll let you know that right now.